Okay, I forgot to hit record on the Zoom call.
Oh
So,
no, we have to start over.
we'll start over. It'll be nice and breezy.
It's fun.
May I take your cloak, madame?
My cloak.
This is Sessions on Cinema, a weekly podcast discussing films new and old, where I invite other aspiring filmmakers and fellow movie lovers. I'm Jacob, and today's guest is.
Alec Lowry. My name is Alec Lowry.
Hey, Alec. How about you introduce yourself?
I'm an independent filmmaker. Graduated from SCAD in 2021, and made a whole bunch of short films, music videos, videos for other people. And currently, I'm trying to produce a short film at the moment, and hope to have a cool. I hope to make some really fun and interesting films in the independent scene going forward.
Yeah, so today we'll be talking about the film Last Night in Soho. It's a horror thriller mystery about a young girl, Eloise, played by Thomasin McKenzie, passionate about fashion design, is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s, where she encounters her idol, a dazzling wannabe singer, Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. But in 1960s London, it is not what it seems, and time seems to be falling apart with shady consequences. So this is our first time watching this, but I'd like to ask if you've seen any of Edgar Wright's other films.
I have. I've seen. I think I've seen almost all of them. I saw Shaun the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Baby Driver, Scott Pilgrim. I haven't seen World's End just yet, but like complete the set. I think that's like all of his feature films, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I think I've seen all of them. I think I've seen all those ones you've mentioned and at World's End. What
Nope.
would you say is your favorite Edgar Wright film?
Hot Fuzz, without a doubt.
Nice, nice. Yeah, my personal favorite is probably between that and Shaun of the Dead. I really love those. The Cornetto trilogy in general is really good.
Yeah, that's
Um,
that's that's peak Edgar Wright, I think.
yeah, I think
Baby
so
Driver's
too.
pretty close to.
Yeah, Baby Driver's really good. So going into some of the context surrounding the film, I think it's interesting to look at the reception of it. It received generally positive reviews from critics who praised its visuals and yet criticized its writing. Unfortunately for Wright, the film performed poorly at the box office, grossing 23 million worldwide on a budget of 43 million. Do you think its lack of financial success was entirely due to the COVID-19 virus, which was very much a factor at the time of its release?
Right,
Or
right.
would you consider this a weak link in the director's filmography?
Okay, so obviously COVID killed. I mean, it pretty much killed everything. At the same time, like there were still movies that were coming out even in theaters at the time that were doing reasonably well despite everything. And I think a couple of factors in here definitely. Like obviously we're in a film circle. Well, like we couldn't stop hearing about the new Edgar Wright movie. We all had to
Yeah,
see it. I missed
yeah,
out. This is my first time watching it. Outside of that, like there wasn't a whole lot of marketing, like hell, even name recognition. Like sure, a few casual movie viewers might know. The guy who made Hot Fuzz, the guy who made Baby Driver, the guy who made Scott Pilgrim. He's making a new movie because this is probably his most unusual movie to date. Like a horror thriller suspense movie that from someone who usually makes like action packed comedies. That's a little bit different.
How would you rank this amongst the director's other films?
I'd say this is probably the weakest one in my opinion. Still really liked it though.
Yeah,
I really had a fun time with it. Just
yeah.
there were some issues I have, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but the general conversation surrounding this film, at least in my spheres, is very negative. Most people I hear
Mm-hmm.
talk about this say it's his worst film, which I think might be true, but
Mm-hmm.
I might dislike it for a very different reason than many do. But we'll get into that later. In the meantime, spoiler alert, to better discuss our opinions on this film, we will be freely talking about in-depth spoilers. If you don't care about those sorts of things, or if you've already seen the flick, then we invite you to keep watching.
And if you haven't seen the movie, uh, um, it's pretty good. I'd check it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I give it my recommendation. Once you've seen it, you can come back.
I would say generally speaking for me, I would pass on it. But that's just me. But generally speaking, I think would we both agree that it's we're both kind of mixed to negative on this film?
Yeah, but definitely mixed.
Okay. So Alec, what was your favorite scene in the movie?
Definitely got to be the first dream sequence, flashback sequence. So after when Eloise goes to bed, she puts on her music. We have the you have the French colors flashing outside. What Edgar Wright and his team did there was actually kind of clever, kind of like this little anchor point, and I thought that was super cool. And then she winds up in the back in the '60s. We see her vicariously living through Sandy's or Anya Taylor-Joy's character through the mirrors, like the way that
Yeah.
Edgar
Yeah, I
Wright
thought the
uses mirrors. I
mirrors
thought.
was so cool. There was like so many different like refractions on
Mm-hmm.
the mirrors. It definitely had an interesting effect.
We struggle with mirrors because
Yeah.
like we don't want the camera in there, and then even like faking mirrors, which they were clearly doing here.
Yeah.
You got to get doubles, and that's tricky.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, that is a beautiful sequence. I'd say it's one of his better directed sequences. I've seen people reposting like some of the behind the scenes footage of that sequence and like how much like ridiculous amount of coordination it took to pull off some of that stuff. Edgar Wright knows how to block a scene, man.
Yeah.
He's like totally flexing when it comes to blocking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think for my favorite scene, it'd probably have to be the first appearance of that like transparent amorphous man figure. It's the
Oh
one,
yeah.
yeah, it's the one where like he's like slowly coming into the room as like
Mm-hmm.
she's going to bed, and it's like for a horror movie, I didn't feel like I got too much horror out of this movie, but that scene
Yeah.
really did make me like tense. Definitely reminded me a lot of something out of like Twin Peaks season 3, like jarring and off-putting. But even as
Totally.
much as I liked when it first appeared, I think I grew to think of it as a bit obnoxious when it became overused and turned into a mob of
Yeah.
zombies. It became like a zombie flick at a certain point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's starting to feel less like ooh spooky ghosts and more like 28 days later.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I
And
don't mean to
and
rag
then
on this film too much in my positivity of it, but I did kind of miss that bit of like ambiguity and clarity, or lack of clarity, that is, that came with it in its first appearance. But I still thought that scene was really impactful. But what would you
mhm.
say is your least favorite scene in the movie?
Of course the aforementioned creepy man slowly approaching him, or slowly approaching Ellie, and of course the jump scare right afterward where all the men show up. Really, jump scares.
Yeah,
Anyway, well,
yeah,
I don't like. Okay, so I almost think that sequence should have been extended. I know you asked for my least favorite scene, but I'm gonna list like I'm just gonna not list, but like basically take three different sequences and
yeah,
treat them as one
sequences.
because they
Yeah,
are the same. They are all the same.
yeah, go right ahead. Yeah,
It's all. Ellie's trying to do something to get to the bottom of this bullshit that's been going on with her, right? And then these apparitions show up, and I make her day worse, and I make her act crazy. We see repeats of what we already know, and shenanigans ensue.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
we get it.
It definitely, there's so many moments where we got just what was going on from visual like exposition, but then it just keeps going on with more visual and verbal exposition.
Yeah, we need
um
more. We need because we need more spoops. We
yeah,
have to have the
yeah, we have to
spoops.
have more zombies, you know. Yeah, no, that brings me exactly into like what was one of my least favorite scenes in the movie, which was where she was talking to her grandma on the phone. It gave the audience so much exposition on information that we already picked up on, and
Mm-hmm.
took away every form of subtlety that got set up beforehand. And to boot, it was really visually uninteresting. It was just like a pan of her talking on the phone for the entire conversation.
Yeah, it's just I forgot about it.
Yeah,
It's yeah, it
it's
was
so forgettable. She's just going
hmm.
on about like don't you know that your mother lived in this city or something, and it's like, oh, don't you know that it's like I know you're feeling lonely and dangerous in the city, but you gotta keep you gotta take care of yourself. You gotta like it's just so it's so over the top and unnecessary.
We know.
Yeah. But yeah, what would you
Anyway,
say is like your overall like impression of the
yeah,
film?
overall impression was, I definitely, let's see, enjoyed the ride. But then the more I think about it, the more I think he actually could have done better in a lot of areas. Even with the central themes, I feel like there could have been a few ways he could have better addressed those.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think just in almost every category, this film felt just like worse than
Not quite.
what I've seen come from him before. Like the editing felt to me to be like muted
Yeah,
compared to his other works where it's
yeah,
so
the
much
editing.
more.
I like a lot of the movie. I like the crazy Edgar Wright stuff is way scaled back,
Yeah.
which I get it. It's I like it's. I think it's kind of in service to the story. He's saving all the crazy shit
Mm-hmm.
for the big moments, and for me, I think that was I think that was kind of the smarter move, in
Mm-hmm.
my opinion, to really give the scenes the impact they need.
Mm-hmm.
Like overall, I'd say the movie did exactly what it set out to do. It hit all the notes it needed to, and not much more than that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I even also found when it came to like visuals, it was just also the color correction felt bland to me. Like it was just so painfully not a 1960s movie, even though it's trying
Hmm.
to like look that way, and it felt so like modern, but like a modern TV show movie. You know, it felt like
Hmm.
so like washed over. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's so many scenes where the choices of splashing a little bit of color and lighting. I think the lighting was particularly good, but I think
Hmm.
that like the color correction was just ugh, like it made no scene when they were just in broad daylight look appealing to me, you know?
Hmm.
And then the story
Yeah.
I found to be like terribly unoriginal. In even in places where it's trying to play with the audience's expectations, it
Hmm.
just felt so expected, and the dialogue was off-putting, but not so much over the top and campy in presentation to riff on the schlocky horror movies that I think inspired it. It
Hmm.
just doesn't have that same appeal as those films, nor does it have the same appeal as Edgar Wright's other films. Where in those,
Yeah.
he like satirically toys with the genre cliches of his inspirators. Like if you take like Hot Fuzz, like you were saying, one of your favorite
Hmm.
Edgar Wright films, at the beginning of that movie, it's such a cliched beginning to like a cop movie where the cop is getting sent to another police station, but instead of the cop being like a dirty cop, it's playing with your expectations and then making him the he's so good. He's too good at his job
Yep.
to be able to stick around at this location. And it's just it's so funny in how it plays
Uh-huh.
with your expectations of the genre. And this feels like it's just doing the expected and then adding nothing and no other layers on top of that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's at least for me.
this movie took itself way more seriously than those other ones,
Yeah, for
for sure.
sure. Yeah. I mean, speaking of like inspirations to this movie, what do you think were some of the inspirations for it?
Let's see. There's definitely a lot of this is you can probably see De Palma in his other movies somewhat a little
Mm,
bit, but especially this one. This is like this is a straight up him trying to pull an Edgar Wright, but he's De Palma sort of thing, or
yeah,
other way
I can
around De
see that.
Palma, but it's Edgar Wright. So it's totally a De Palma film, like in the vein of like Carrie or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's
But
the thing is Carrie's also playing off of those sort of B movies.
and then of course tons of references to other movies. Like I caught onto the 8.5 reference. 8.5 reference, not Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction was referencing 8.5.
Yeah,
With the dance scene.
yeah,
Yeah, Bellini did it first.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
that's generally how it
but
goes.
yeah, but then and then the Vesper shows up. That's apparently a James Bond reference. There's
Mm, interesting.
little Easter eggs here and there
Yeah,
of classic movies,
yeah.
and then I think I'll dispute kind of your opinion on the cinematography looking not very 60s. Like like yeah, it looks like super glossy and stuff,
Yeah.
but in certain sequences, I absolutely see some '60s psychedelia kind of sneaking in,
Mm.
like which is that's interesting. Like that's pretty interesting. Like that was pretty interesting to see. Like like the more I thought about, it, like I mean, it's the '60s. They're playing the Who. They're playing like some of those psychedelic. Like in the soundtrack, you have some of that psychedelic rock that was popular back in the day, but still very like '60s as fuck. I must
No,
say,
I get that. I get that, like,
like
there's
the
a lot of
psychedelic stuff,
elements.
like it's like still not the most '60s looking movie. I'm just saying this is one area where it does do
Yeah,
a pretty decent job.
I would agree with that. I'd say that it definitely takes a lot of elements from 60s films, but I just felt when it came to just like sitting there and feeling that decade, I don't know. I just didn't get that.
Mm.
But what like other inspirations that I saw from the film were like Suspiria. Like I saw
Mm.
like with the blue and red lights flashing in the apartment. I
Okay.
totally got the same like with the stabbing scene in
I see. I
Suspiria.
mean, I haven't seen the movie yet, but I can see it.
Yeah, and Persona, a little bit of that like melding of two women into one.
Mm.
You've got, and then both films also have that aspect of celebrity playing off of it, and I think there's a little bit of Black Swan in there, with like
Mm.
seeing the alter ego in the mirror, you know. So I can
Hmm.
see it playing off of a lot of those films,
Hmm. And then,
but
do you think it plays off like '60s movies the way it wants to?
I think I don't think it succeeds. I don't think it succeeds. I feel like when you've got like again going back to Hot Fuzz, you've got these like cop shows that it's sort of playing off of, and then it'll get to these action montages, and it'll just be like full like it'll go full Michael Bay where
Hmm.
it'll twirl around the protagonist and then it'll cut
Yeah.
like 300 times because it's
Uh-huh.
visually obnoxious and visually epic and whatever, but it's doing so so it can lend itself to that sort of genre. Meanwhile, with this, as much as it sort of it had the color, it had the costumes, it had a lot of these things that you'd think would mesh well. I just don't think it sticks the landing on it, at least for me.
Hmm. Like, I guess at some points I felt like I don't know if I've seen the '60s movie. Do I get the reference? But I guess I'm not alone in that. It just doesn't. It's not quite as '60s as you might think it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might just come down to just the way those movies were filmed. I mean, we've got examples like Marvelous Miss Maisel, which I think looks really good and is it definitely captures a lot of feelings of that time period where it's supposed to be made. At the same time, it does still have that very modern, sleek look to it that I think is just it's possibly missing that film grain and it's missing just a little bit of
Hmm.
something that makes me internally recognize that it's of that era. But I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to recreate stuff like that. Although we have had films deal with black and white cinematography way after the black and white era, and they look like they fit right in, like they could have been made
Hmm.
back then. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to be able to make something look just like it popped out of that era, but I think it's also important, you know.
Hmm.
What uh what did you think the film was saying regarding the idealism of the past?
Okay, so all right, now we're hitting like the central themes of the movie. I kind of picked up on it in the movie itself. I even I found a quote from Edgar Wright, pretty much confirming this. So this is very much thematically this movie is very much a response to the nostalgia obsession that we had in the past decade or so. Like obviously here we had the cool psychedelia, we had the cool hippies, we had all this fun resistance stuff. But then like remember what they were protesting like the civil rights movement, uh, the just general conservatism that was kind of getting on people's nerves in the '60s. That's why all that stuff existed to begin with. And of course, like either way, there were of course systemic issues that pretty much pervade all of those past decades, and as far as we can tell, were worse back then. So I
Yeah.
think it's it's good to acknowledge that. And this movie, I think, it does touch on that, at least when it comes to
Yeah, I think
to women and sex work and stuff like that. I feel like it could have done better though.
no, I completely agree. I think that the 60s were not so glamorous, and the character,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like an important factor for the character, is that they sort of idealize this idea of the city, and then when it turns to be so bad and so gross and grimy, then they end up needing to put all of their hopes and dreams into this other idealized version
Mm-hmm.
of of what could be, and they look to the past and in order for inspiration for their dress design. Just like how she idealized Sandy, she
Mm-hmm.
saw that she was just like her and that she was a victim and of
Mm-hmm.
circumstance, and it ended up turning out that underneath the surface there was a lot more like evil
Mm-hmm.
lying underneath.
Absolutely. I feel like this. I like to think this movie is like getting back at all those people who are like, oh, back in my day, everything was so and a sad, simpler time sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like back in my day, music was so much better, or it was such a simpler time. It was no simpler than it is now. People exist. People are complicated, and that's always been the case. And like sure, a lot of things have gotten better since. There's a reason why actually having to go back, like going back to the past, may not be a good idea. But yeah, it's definitely definitely him calling out those viewpoints.
Yeah, and a lot of it was really funny. Like, what did you think of like the comedy throughout the movie? Like, was it always funny? Did it break up the pacing of the film? Did it fit this sort of like 60s nightmare genre?
Okay, this is gonna be weird, but I didn't really find the movie funny. I didn't really
Yeah.
laugh during the movie. I didn't. I like there wasn't a whole lot of it that really rang comedy to me.
No, I agree. I think it actually worked for me, and I think there actually was a good amount of comedy just sprinkled in and much more subtle than the rest of his films.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, there was like the line where she's like, I would never do that. I would never leave in the middle of the night, and then it cuts straight to her leaving in the middle of the night from the other apartment.
Mm. Oh
And
yeah.
then yeah, and then there's like the other bit where she's being told that's a lovely name, and I mean it totally gets into like horrific
Mm-hmm.
territory later, but the first time it's said, and then it's the second time it's said, and the third time it's said, it's just so you understand immediately that they're trying to be a little cheeky with how men just like do not care about like the women they're talking to in nightclubs. And then I thought there was other bits where like the guy's like yelling at her in the streets, and he's like, "You tell her I say hello," and then he gets run over by the car like immediately after,
Oh yeah.
and then the lady's like, "He was a cop." It's like it was so ridiculous and absurd. I couldn't help but laugh when it came to stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that.
mean, like something like that would have would not be out of place in his older movies. Just here,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just a lot more serious of plot. It's not
no,
really a
I
comedic movie
agree.
per se.
I
And
agree for sure.
I like obviously those little subtle things here and there. It's cute. It's
Hmm.
cheeky, but like overall, like it didn't really need any more jokes per se.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it worked, but it really did feel like at times it was trying to be pulled into multiple different directions,
mm,
and perhaps the comedy like was not fitting of this movie, but it was nice to get more Edgar Wright jokes, you know. I think he's a funny guy. Um but we talked about the visuals a bit earlier, but what did you think about the film's usage of CGI?
I see CGI. So besides the faceless men apparitions that act like zombies, I think it was pretty good until it got annoying.
Yeah.
But I like that was probably the most obvious use of CGI. Like the rest of it, I thought was pretty tasteful. And then I think another very interesting example was probably towards the end with the jumping back and forth between the flat staircase and the fantasy staircase during the final confrontation scene. A warbly effect I wasn't really a fan of, but then like what they did there was kind of cute.
The CGI was like not the worst, but when it got to
Mhm.
those scenes where it had the like faceless men, it just they were just waves and waves of them.
Mhm.
It became way too pervasive for me. Like I just never understood why directors that like love an old genre of filmmaking pre CGI decide to use so much CGI in their films.
Compensation.
Yeah, it's like part of what made them iconic to begin with is that like practical effects. But either way, I did like a lot of visual elements of the film, like you were saying, the kaleidoscopic visuals and in the club, and the I really love the knife, the eyes on the knife.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that murder, like that first murder sequence was so cool
yes,
and so freaky. When this movie goes fucking nuts, it's like goes full Edgar Wright crazy.
yeah.
Those are the best parts of the movie.
Yeah. Although like reminding me of like certain visual elements of the film, I didn't even notice until now, but when it comes to shot composition, throughout Edgar Wright's other films, I don't think he uses a ton of wide shots. I think he
Mm.
usually seems to use a lot
Hmm.
of like insert shots and really cool edits to make
Hmm.
up for this. But in
Yeah.
this, because it's lacking that sort of like extreme editing style, and then it's in addition also lacking wide shots. It's very pronounced, at least to me, because there was this scene where we get this nice overhead shot of the town square for a fragment of a second, and it reminded me of how much I wish there were more shots like that, especially with how
Hmm.
small she feels in the big city. I
Hmm.
think that there just aren't enough shots where she's eclipsed by the enormity of her
Right,
surroundings.
right. There was this, like I think right after the telephone booth scene that you brought up earlier. Like
Hmm.
there was a pretty cool one shot after that. Yeah, she runs out, everything's just engulfing her, and then she's meeting up with the love interest. We'll get to that. We'll get to the love interest.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like the love interest and way that women are portrayed in this sort of idealization, what would
Hmm.
you say is like the overall theme of the film?
Yeah, so obviously I already talked about the critique of nostalgia that the movie's trying to push thing. Like also, but also like it's more pronounced towards the end. I wish the movie did more with it. Uh, but uh,
Hmm.
but definitely the idea of letting your trauma hold you back in the past and not letting that go. There's definitely an element of that with Sandy towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So I think the movie really could have done more with that. He's definitely dissing on toxic and gross men for sure. And then
I I I I think that like to me the moral was like almost like in your face. Like
mhm,
it's saying that like men make women into killers, you know? Like that these
mhm,
men make women kill not only them but also other women, and
mhm,
that and that these like these creeps who end up forcing these women to like either decide on like getting blacklisted or on doing sexual favors for them,
mhm,
they end up resulting in them striking back. And I think it definitely is sort of a commentary on that Me Too movement, and I think
yep.
it's interesting in that way. Although personally, I find it a bit more interesting and accurate commentary when the men are ultimately left unscathed as a result of women's
Mhm,
violence and anger towards men. Because in the end, there's
mhm,
so many people who left with no punishment. Like I wish there
mhm,
was a scene where after rescuing from the burning building, they reminded you of the sexism that is still persisting in the modern day
mhm.
world that they showed earlier in
Yeah,
the film, and
yeah,
that
yeah.
murdering
They could have done that.
and murdering these men led to none of those men to change or force them at all to take responsibility for their misogyny. That isn't the revolution that I think this movie's proposing. I think it's very like like anti-murder, if you will. What a hot take. But I mean, I think
Hmm.
it's definitely not necessarily. It's more about the individual change of this one woman rather than a greater societal change. And I'm not so sure that
Hmm.
I found it that impactful in its themes. But
Hmm.
that brings me back to earlier. Does this movie perhaps get some of its hate because it's in part a men are bad movie? And are
Hmm.
incels running to the picket line for this film because that could be a factor?
All right, so I mean, if Letterboxd is anything to go off of, maybe. But yeah, I've seen worse.
Yeah, I think
I've
this
seen much
film,
worse.
yeah, I think it's mediocre for many reasons, but its take on men's abuse towards women in the entertainment space is
It's
not one of those reasons, at least for me. But
yeah.
do you think the film is worth praise or financial success despite all this?
I think despite all that, like again, it deserves all the praise for Edgar Wright still flexing his ability to do to direct performances and blocking and cinematography. He still did something outside of his wheelhouse. He tried something new. I think it's great. It's great for him to not kind of be typecasted as a particular kind of artist or filmmaker. And of course, doesn't mean it's going to be his best work all the time. Oftentimes, when the artists do this, it may not be for a lot of people.
I completely agree. What would you rate this film from 1 to 10?
All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say kind of like a mid to strong 6 to a light 7 at the very most. Like again, I really enjoyed the ride of watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many scenes in there I thought were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're just in the moment, not thinking too much about everything, it's
Agree. I think that I mean I watched this with my family and they were like I was being too critical. I was being too harsh on the film because they at least
mhm.
enjoyed that ride of it, but
Yeah.
I did not personally. For me, this is gonna have to be at about a 3 out of 10. I just did not get that innate sensational value that I get from so many other of both Edgar Wright's films and the films that we talked about that it perhaps inspired this film. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off today?
I mean, it's your okay. This is your decision whether or not you want to leave it in. But I did mention the love interest. We'll get to that, so I might as well bring it up.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, questionable, pretty underdeveloped. The fact that he's like the only black character is a little, and even kind of gets caught up in this situation where he could very much have been, where he could have very easily been accused of non-consensual action.
For sure, he definitely acted as a like a tropey sort of he's the good one kind of male character
Hmm.
to sort of stave off the argument that this film is like, oh yeah, all men are bad 'cause oh look over there, there's that one good one. um
Hmm.
but as
Totally.
as a result of just making him all tropes and no character building. He's just so lame and corny and there's so
Hmm.
many lines like the one where she's like, "Yeah, I really want to I don't want to go to sleep." And then he's like, "Oh, but I can keep you up." Is so dumb. It's
Hmm.
so cringe, honestly. But
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, like probably that's probably one of my least favorite aspects of the movie is it's not very engrossing, and like I said, a few moments might actually I could actually be interpreted as something even more problematic if you're
no,
not
absolutely.
careful.
You don't know exactly how sane she is right now, how consenting she is right now during that scene. It's
Hmm.
very, I mean, it plays it off as like she was because in the end they ended up getting together and whatnot, and that she did love him. But in another
Hmm.
scenario, it could have been the exact opposite, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a good point to wrap up. Thank you, Alec, for joining me today for this discussion of Last Night in Soho.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
And if you're someone out there watching this and you have a recommendation for a movie to review for a future podcast, please comment down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Once again, this has been Sessions on Cinema, and I'll talk to you next time.
All right, see you.